Welcome to Tech This Way.
So anyway, so the whole point of the call then really is just to find out more about you, and then a little bit of history, and then what's this community building. And you have an interesting background on LinkedIn anyway, right? You were at Guangdong University, and then doing all this community
Yeah.
building, and then the legal part of it. So I think
Yeah, it's very
it's just a casual
busybody.
chat on that.
Yeah.
The world needs some busybodies.
Yeah, I think there's so many of them. If they're channeling their energies in the right areas, and that's better too.
So why don't we start from there? Your well, not too many years back. I've been speaking to people who go all the way back to the 90s. So I guess for you, it's not too far back.
Well, I was born in the 90s.
Oh no, I feel old already.
It's okay though. Yeah. So I was born. I've seen the 90s. Okay. I was there. But from a very different perspective, I had different life worries in the 90s compared to most of us.
So what is that? So that's even starting with your name, right? So where are you from? What's your background?
Oh, so the name itself, it's a real name, by the way, Pixie Cigar. A lot of people think it's some kind of stage name and all that, but it's a very, very real name. And Pixie Cigar is my name. It's not even my last name, yeah. So I'm Hungarian Chinese, born in the US, grew up in China. I shortly lived in Malaysia in Penang, in Georgetown, for 2 years back in when the tsunami happened in 2004, 2003, 2004. And then moved back to China. So pretty much by the time I was 20 years old, I've moved about 20 plus minus times to 5 countries, 8 cities before I was 20.
So
Before I was 18.
What passport do you have?
Hungarian passport. I went with my mom's because, so my mom's the Hungarian one. And for us, the decision for me to go with which passport was purely based on which is the easiest to travel and has less business tax. So when I was born, my parents were like, okay, Canadian passport, she needs to pay world income tax. That's definitely not okay. So let's get her a nationality to have better tax cuts.
Well, you need to decide somehow.
A very practical decision on which country I belong to.
So where is home then for you? And where are you dialing in from? I'm assuming from Malaysia now.
Yes, I'm dialing from Empire, from Damansara area. Okay. I live in Damansara. And where is home? For me, home is wherever I have a pillow to sleep that night. No, because I move around so much and I'm so used to having to get used to different environments. So I was born in the US, right? And I right away moved to China. And the time I moved to China, I was 3 years old. No one at home spoke Chinese. I was the only one, despite my father being almost full Chinese. He did not speak a word of Mandarin. And that's 90s in China, not speaking Mandarin, you're dead. Like, you cannot get by. But my parents figured out a way, and one of the ways was me learning Chinese. So by around 3.5, 4 years old, I was the family designated translator for everything.
The interpreter, okay.
Yes, the interpreter. So I had to get used to like very new environment. Right. And that played a huge role in what I do today.
So then you grew up in China?
Mostly in China. I spent a few years in Malaysia when I was a kid in primary school. So around 8, 9 years old, I was 7, 8 years old, I was in Malaysia in Georgetown.
So why is that?
I went to public school. Why is that? Because my parents suddenly felt like they wanted to move to Malaysia. So most of our moving decisions is based on, let's move. Okay, we're going. Even my parents, the reason why they moved to China was because my mother's agreement to marry my father was based on, I will marry you if we move to Asia. This is a
Right.
Hungarian telling a banana who's living in the US, like, I will agree to marry you if we move to a country we have no clue about, we can't speak the language, we know nothing about, then I will marry you. So my family makes very spontaneous moving decisions. It's probably a lot to do with because my mom's background. So my mom's background, I'm ethnically a Roma, which is Gypsy. I'm Romani.
Ah.
So it's really part of our culture to not be bounded by land. We're very much people who moves a lot, who needs to adapt to new environments, and who enjoys that kind of challenge of, okay, new place, let me evolve myself and be part of this community, then pack up and leave and go for the next community.
So your mom met your dad in the US.
Yeah, she was dancing when she was there. She was a ballet dancer.
Wow. Okay, so then
Yeah.
you had that short stint in Georgetown for a couple of
Yeah.
years.
Mm.
And then what happened?
Then the economy wasn't doing good during that time, especially if you're looking at in Penang, other than if you were in the travel industry, the other
90s.
industry really wasn't growing. Like 2003, 2004, tsunami just happened. Even tourism is not doing good as well. My family was a bit in tourism too. So the situation wasn't doing well. And most importantly, my sisters and I were growing up, and my parents wanted to make sure we got the education that we needed. And for us, my family is very important for us to get our proper Chinese education, traditional Chinese education. So we went back. No, what I mean by traditional is like my sisters studied um, what do you call classical music. I did opera. We did a lot of classical education that can only be taught in China. So my
Wow.
parents went back to China. I went to Xi'an, where the terracotta warriors are from, aka my favorite country, my favorite city in the world. And yeah, we spent a few years there. And we moved there because my parents read about this city that was a Muslim city. It had a lot of Muslims and also had Chinese like cultural education. So then they decided to move to yet another city they have never been to. So
Oh,
like
I
the
see.
first time
So,
visiting was
so,
us moving.
so when you first went to China where you grew up was not in Xin'an.
No, so I was first in Guangzhou. I'm ethnically Cantonese on my father's side. Guangdong, we were there for a few years, went to Malaysia. Then said my parents converted to Islam in Malaysia. So I'm not born Muslim, yeah. And then we moved to Xi'an. And every time we move, it's never that we travel, we see the place first, and then we like, let's get to know it. It's my parents Google and go online and research stuff, and then decide, let's pack our entire life to a city that we have read on Wikipedia.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah. So I always traveled for necessity. It was never out of like leisure. Oh, I'm traveling the world. No, I'm moving around.
So from Xin'an, you came back to Malaysia.
Well, there's no coming back because I'm
Oh,
not from Malaysia.
that's true.
No. Xi'an in 2008, after the Olympics and after the big earthquake, where the city I was living in, we moved to the south in Guangzhou, mainly because of business opportunities, and essentially it was because of work. Because similar to Penang, the economy in Xi'an back then, 12 years ago, wasn't really good. It was purely tourism based. So my father, being a business person, he was teaching English for a while, but for a long term, with three girls growing up, getting into their teenage years, it's not a good place. He can't make enough to sustain a family. So then he moved to the south, and that's where he started his business. And we also moved to down south. That was probably my biggest cultural shock, moving from the north of China to the south of China.
Huh.
Probably the only time I had the difficult time getting used to things.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then, and why was that?
Culturally, they're so different. Plus, I was going through my early teen years. So when you're in your like 13, 14, you're already at the stage that you're very weird and you're thinking too much and you're very awkward. Plus, the cultural differences from the north and south of China is so great that even as a grown-up moving to the north or south, it's kind of hard for you to adapt at first. People, their mindset is different. How they interact with people is very, very different. food is different. Some people move from the north to the south and they have difficulties like eating because the food diet is so different. The rice versus noodle, spicy versus non-spicy, it affects people in many different ways. But for me, it was more like psychologically speaking, because the mentality of people are so different in the south. It's a bit more difficult to deal with southerners as compared to northerners where I was living.
And I guess, as you were saying, you're also a rebellious teenager at that point, I guess.
Yeah, plus you're 14. No 14 years old is pleasant to deal with. Let's be real.
Yeah. So from Guangdong, then why the
Guangdong,
jump to Malaysia?
few cities within Guangdong. So I started working. I stayed there for the longest time. I went for my high school, my university, everything was in Guangdong, and I started working there too. So I started working in 2010. So what happened is that I worked before going to university. So I took like a gap time. I finished high school earlier, went to work for 2 years as an interpreter. So what I was doing is that businesses will come to China and they will source for products. So I handled from airport to airport their entire trip. So I picked them up at the airport, schedule all of their meetings with different suppliers around China, be their translator, be their personal assistant, handle their evening entertainment if they're going out for drinks or organizing stuff. So I was doing that right after I finished high school for 2 years. Kind of part of my dad's business, but it was a complete different segment. After doing that, I went for university because I felt like, you know what, why not? Let's go to university. And then I did animation. It was a very random decision. I actually went for filming. Filming is what I wanted to do because I was always in love with filming. Because previously I went to military school. Before I went to university, I was in military school for a few years. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, so it was very random. So I went to military school, went to martial arts school, and a lot of people who study martial arts, they end up going into the film industry. And I was always interested in films, whether it be the acting part of it, the directing. But after the few years of dealing in military school and martial arts, a bit in acting, by the time I went to university, I knew that what I love to do is being the one behind the scenes organizing everything, making the show happen. I really enjoyed that part. Also, identifying talent to grow them in industries. That was things that was very exciting for me. But unfortunately, a school that had a really good filming major, the day I went to sign up, I've already gotten in, you know, the day you're giving out just your paperwork, like your book fees and simple stuff like that, registration. They told me only 7 people signed up that year. So they canceled my major.
Oh
I was
no, okay.
yeah, and my school had like really, really good equipment for filming and all that, but no, only for some reason 7 people signed up that year, and we were told that they will cancel our major because it doesn't make sense running the major with 7 people in it. So they told me I can pick any major I want in the arts and tech department because it's art tech. So all the architecture, filming, and also the computer science students were all in the art tech department. I can pick anything I want, and I never did art. Yeah, I've never drawn or anything. And I'm like, okay, what is the hardest major and the most similar to filming? And they told me animation. I'm like, oh, cartoons. Okay. So
Why not?
yeah, why not? Like, why not? So then I started school and I was really bad at the beginning because I didn't know how to draw. All my classmates had 3 years fine arts experience. Yeah, but I got through everything, managed to get up all my grades and all that, which was a really interesting major. The reason why I'm even bringing it up is because animation, I think, played a really important role of what I do today. Like the mindset of how to conduct projects, how to work, because I was always in the project management role. I like to make sure that how do you build all of these segments together and bring together a whole animation and mobilizing the different people. I found that really interesting. And even though the day I finished my university, the final year project. I have never ever done animation ever again. But it helps me a lot because now like I have to do website designs, like the
Yeah.
wireframing, or even like a lot of things I do. It always links back to the stuff that I learned in animation, so it's quite helpful.
Cool. Then what happens?
Then I graduate, and I don't want to live in China anymore.
Hmm.
I don't like living there any longer. And because I worked there already 2 years, I knew what was the working environment like for someone in their early 20s. It was hyper competitive, and it wasn't an environment that I wanted to stay in during that time because I've already went through 2 years of as a junior in the working life in China. And I knew that if I wanted to try out new things, I had to step out again from my comfort zone because by that time, that part of China became my comfort zone. I know the city inside and out. You ask me anything, I know all the business stuff there, everything that's happening in that city. There was nothing challenging for me. Because for most people, when you go into your working life, it's a complete new phase. But by the time I finished university, I've already explored that entire phase in China. And at that time, my mother wanted to move outside of China because I've already finished university. My sisters are going into university, and she wanted to move to a country with halal food. That was her criteria, halal food. And 2014, Arab Springs broke out, all the stuff happening. Lebanon was our first choice, actually. Since 2013, we were planning on Lebanon, but then a lot of things happened. It's still happening. So then we were looking at second option, which is outside of Middle East. And we were remembering the years that we lived in Malaysia. And my mother was like, mostly English speaking, food is amazing, people are amazing. Why don't we just move to Malaysia? So she moved to Malaysia with my sisters. I followed her a few months later when I finished my university project. And then it's 2014 June. I'm in Malaysia now.
In KL or in Penang?
Subang. Yeah,
Okay.
KL Subang. Yeah, I lived in Subang for a few years.
Right.
So unlike most expats, when they move to a new country, move to KL, they live in like the Bangsar, Damansara area. No, I went Subang. I just went like
Subang is not
the
a bad
reason.
place.
Yeah, I actually like it. I live in SS area in Subang. They have my favorite mamak in the world, Darussalam. It's so good. So I lived there for 2 years dealing with my father's e-commerce business. That was on the side, but that was more of just like side income thing. The main things that I was focusing on was the first year I didn't really know what to do because I was already doing community building efforts in China since 2010. Before university, I was working with minority rights centers, seeing how can you engage the Muslim community in China to better integrate with the mainstream, not only with Muslims as well, but also with different minority groups. They have a harsh time in China. And the thing is, the majority, the Hans, they don't understand the kind of struggles that they are facing. For them, they think that the noise that these minority groups are bringing up is nonsense. So, which is not nonsense, definitely. So a lot I worked on was trying to fill that gap between. So by the time I was in Malaysia, there was a year I was working on different random things with motorcycles. I felt like there was a gap in me. I did not feel like I was actually achieving anything. And so I went and got myself my Malaysian driver's license and decided, you know what, I'm going to go to every single event, meet anyone possible, agree to every single opportunity until I drop and until I figure out something. So
Right.
that was 2015. That's the year I met Zaim and team. I pretty much went to, that's the really early days of events in KL, right? With meetup groups still being more active. PTIC's hardly there, Eventbrite. I went to so many events because I want to go to events to understand how do people get together, how to organize events, and just I had no clue what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be inspired, like being triggered. And I would join so many I have went to MLM events too, which is very interesting. Just pro tip, if someone says the marketing event, kind of check the background of the organizers before you attend a marketing event. Uh,
Or the other one is, do you wanna achieve your goals and your dreams?
Oh my God, yeah. Marketing events and goal setting. Oh, those are horrible. But it was really interesting. I actually like attending MLM events because I was analyzed how do they communicate with people to convince people to do things. MLMs are the coolest communities using MLMs and cults. There's so much for us to learn from them. And no, it really is. They're like extremely good at what they do. And if we channel it in the right ways, it's really good for
I
society if you
guess,
think about
yeah, there are similarities. There are
it. Because it's a
similarities.
skill set. At the end of the day, community building is a technique. Whether you use it for a good community, helping minority groups, helping our society, or you use it as a cult or MLM, it's the same way to do it. It's just different messaging. It's
So
exactly
now
the same.
is the Pixie Cigar cult being built?
Yeah. Almost. So I did that for a few years. I got involved with startups, first with NGOs and youth. So I dealt a lot with nation building school. In the beginning, I was part of the early group of people. A lot on youth, looking into youth unemployment because I wanted to understand why are youth not being hired. It just doesn't make sense for me because every other founder I meet, they're desperate for talent. Every business friend you have, they're telling me, do you know any talent I can find? No one's ever saying like, you know what, I don't need to hire people. Almost everyone needs to hire, but the problem is that gap of the skill sets that they actually need because it doesn't make sense for you to hire someone who cannot achieve the workload. So I looked a lot in that. Then I went with startups. I worked a lot with investor communities, helping them link them to startups. So like investors are looking for good deals to invest in. They wanted to meet right startup founders. So I would organize actually pitch competitions. But these pitch stuff that I did were very internal basis. So a lot of people didn't know that I actually organized these things because they weren't kind of public type of events. It was a handful of people that I will look at to say, all right, I'll work with investors to help organize their like open day. So, but none of these are public kind of things. So I did that for a while. That was really interesting, and it really helped on not only network building, but also trying to make sure that the events I conduct are actually bringing value. So with that, I think that's around 2016, 17. I get interested in 2018, get interested in legal technology. I always loved law. I was that weird 16 years old on the way to school. I was reading criminal law. Like that was my my commuting entertainment was reading law. Like going through each clause, I found it so fun, and I loved reading cases. That was the most interesting thing. And I'll have moments I'm like, why was this the sentence? It's not fair, or like they should have went harsher. And I'll have this internal communication, me in my school uniform on the bus going to school. But I kind of forgot about my love for law because when I went to university, it was an option. I wanted to go for law school, but my mom told me that if you study law and I don't visit you in prison one day for fighting for human rights of other people who's being oppressed, you're not my daughter. So my family is very hardcore. If
It's all about the community,
extreme,
yeah.
yeah, we're very, very socialist people. That's my family. And my mom grew up in Soviet Union, and Hungary had a lot way better side compared to the counterparts like Poland and all of that. And her family was always very involved in social matters, like in law. Her side is lawyers, military, and police. So we're really, really into like social justice. So when I heard that statement as 18 years old, I'm like, okay, maybe I don't study law for now.
Maybe I'll do
Because I
film
know,
instead.
yeah, like maybe film instead. But I was always still interested, and I kind of forgot about that love when I came to Malaysia because I was just busy with other stuff. Then I went, someone contacted me on LinkedIn, and he said that like, hey, I want to invite you for coffee to my office. And I'm very used to this, people reaching out to me, and I really love it because I want to talk to other people too. Not always every meeting is about, I'm going to get something from you. Sometimes it's a random conversation and get inspired so much and think like, hey, what are other things that we can do? It was Jofan from back then Can Law, when Can Law was still as a legal tech in KL. And there was a mismatch because they were trying to hire an intern. But when they spoke to me, then they realized I'm not an intern type of person. But then we had such a good conversation about legal tech because I was sharing ideas, they were sharing pain points. Then I connected with one of the employees there, Joe Fan, afterwards, and we thought like, hey, let's build a legal tech community in KL. And Legal Hackers is a global community on legal tech itself, looking at the innovation of law. But when we say the innovation of law, it's not precisely just only with lawyers. It's with regulation technology, fintech, anything that is the core structure of our society, the fundamentals. And for me, I was very surprised when there was no legal tech community in Malaysia, because to me, law and order is the fundamentals of our society. And if we don't innovate there, I really don't know why am I wasting time on food tech. Like, no offense to those, but like law is so cool and so important. Why don't we have this kind of environment to innovate the oldest industry in the world? It's stupid.
Or the third oldest in the universe.
Oh yeah, first is what was it? Prostitution, right?
Yeah, and banking next.
Oh yeah, prostitution, banking, and law. The great combination, right? It all plays in this ecosystem together. You make money, you bank it in, but you get any legal problems with your prostitution business, you have legal here. It's a good combination. So I started doing legal tech in KL, and that was quite interesting because no one else was really building this kind of environment. And how I started out was essentially just posting on LinkedIn, and I added about 30% of all lawyers in KL. So my thought was that if you're a lawyer and you're kind of interested in innovation, and you're not necessarily interested in innovation, but you're open to technology, let's take a step back, because we can't look at it like other industries that we can say, all right, agriculture, let's target this kind of people. Who's into tech, who's already using products. The problem is legal tech. They're not using any products. They're not listing their services because it's illegal in Malaysia for a lawyer to list their market themselves. So then I wanted to see, okay, let me just talk to someone who will see my message online first. So I added 30% of lawyers in KL. I sent them all a personal message saying, hey, I'm Pixie. Hey, so-and-so, I'm Pixie, building a legal tech community in Malaysia. Hope we can connect. I did that, and by the time I organized my first event, I was already able to have a following because people...
Sorry, this is with Legal Hackers already or before that?
Yes, with Legal Hackers.
Okay.
So the moment I decided on this whole Legal Hackers thing and legal tech, I'm like, okay, let's do this. First is I need to gain visibility of myself within this community, because if it's startups, I won't be worried because I've been in startup scene by then for already 2 years. But law is different. It's a whole different ball game, different people. I need to let my name be seen enough. So adding people, posting a lot of content relating to law, even just random questions saying, hey, what do you think about this? It helped out eventually when we were organizing our first event and then leading up to the first legal tech hackathon. That was a really, really interesting and exciting thing to be organizing that. And the entire team that we had was purely volunteers. Everyone was a volunteer. We didn't pay anyone. Even the hackathon, the organizing team, everyone was volunteer. I just posted this form on LinkedIn and Facebook, be like, hey guys, who's willing to organize a hackathon with me? And I conned a lot of people in the startup community. Like Daniel, he's from First Track. He's now the co-founder of Law Tech Malaysia. So Law Tech Malaysia is a spin-off from Legal Hackers. So for Legal Hackers, it was very important that we are not for profit. And when the team decided that, you know what, we wanted to bring in not only the profit element, but more as a incorporated business, my opinion was it has to be separated. It cannot be the same, because Legal Hackers as a brand is a grassroots community, hence the spin-off of Law Tech Malaysia, which they're doing a lot of cool stuff on. But their focus is a bit different. So all of these things spun out from just a random conversation from someone trying to hire a intern.
But I guess it sounded like the legal community was just hungry for something to happen, right? But just nobody got around to it.
there was a lot of triggering because when you look at Can Law, there was a few legal tech communities, legal tech startups was actually facing a lot of struggles. We had a lot of close downs because of the regulations right now. And since we don't have this proper sandbox like what we had with fintech in the earlier days, we can't really we are trying to work with regulators a lot, and regulators are also trying to see like how can we implement legal technology. But the thing is, when it comes to law, it's not just like that, let's try these things out. There's so many different implementations to it. There's the writing of the law itself, which is already complicated enough to make changes. And if you see in that time, same year in 2018 is when the Bar Council also came up with their legal innovation department. So yes, it's the same people who are in the bar councils, but you can see that it's a step. Now it's already 2 years later, and you're already seeing some differences within the market. And more people having this conversation, legal councils, bar councils, having more trainings on technology, whether it be on coding and project management, just in general, stepping out of their current comfort zone, looking at how can we practice law differently, or shall I say, how can you practice law in a more effective way? Because it's not that we're saying that lawyers are doing it wrong, definitely no. Let's just start improving. Every industry is improving their internal processes. Why can't law do the same? So that is really the core essence of what legal hackers advocate and what I advocate as well. It's not that I want everyone to start adopting different kind of project management systems. It will be great, but that's not the real problem. It's not that you're not using a tool, it's that you don't have the internal processes that help streamline this of using this effectively and also improving your business.
So is the legal tech area then your priority focus right now, or are you still looking at broader community building initiatives also?
So if you have seen, like on my end, legal tech, I kind of put it on hold a bit last year because I got into a different project and it took a lot of bandwidth out of me because I really wanted to focus on getting that right. It's with the company that I'm working with now. So I work with Lazada full time, and my main focus was to grow their seller community. And this was a really interesting project because when I look at this I look at it building a corporate community. So this was something that I did not have experience in doing before. I had startups and all that, but I didn't have an existing monster under Alibaba ecosystem. Like, how can you grow what's already there, improve the structure, and then start growing it? So last year, a huge focus of my time was purely on making this one right. So legal tech was kind of put on hold, but this year I'm getting back to it again. But if you were to say what's my main focus, it will still always be the essence of community building. So since 2018, I was organizing different workshops and study groups with community builders because I wanted to understand what were the problems that community builders were facing. I realized that a lot of community builders do not talk to each other. They have their own little world. They have their own ecosystems. Like, okay, I'm a community builder in this area or that area. They don't talk to each other. Even though by core, they're actually doing the same thing, but just in different style. Just like if you're doing a marketing campaign, are you doing it for a food company or a sports company? It's the same technique. You just understand your target audience differently. It's the same thing with community builders. So I started working on this thing called the Community Builders Union. For me, if you would say my end goal is to see how can I develop more community builders within the current industry, not just in community building, but making community building an essential role for businesses. When they're planning their organizational structure, they need to have a headcount plan for community builders. But it's not easy just to say that, because if there's no talent in the area, they can put a headcount. Okay, they commit to putting a headcount on this, but if there's no one to do it, then it defeats the purpose. So I look into a lot, even the content I've been sharing in my videos, it's purely on community building. How can I train more community builders? And a lot of people look at community building as a standalone thing. Actually, there's so many people who are already doing community building roles, but they don't see it as a community building role. Whether you look at HR, every founder is essentially a community builder. And I feel that these roles, if they implement different ways of doing things, or in a way, look at stuff with an additional perspective, then they can already start implementing that community building element within their businesses, which is essential for long-term growth. If you look at how do you grow that community, that fan base, super users and consumers around your product and services. These things don't take 2 days. You can't just put a lot of money in an ad campaign and expect everyone to love your brand. It's a long-term growth. It's building a relationship with the person. You don't just suddenly like, hey, would you do this for me? And then you move on with life. It takes nurturing. Yeah. So that, I would say that is definitely more of my focus.
So as you look at all the various different community builders, which in Malaysia anyway, which communities do you think are the ones which have gelled or has moved ahead the best?
Oh, that is a hard one. So
Or they
one
all
of the reasons,
useless?
so one of the reasons why I even started looking at how do you nurture more community builders is in 2018, a lot of my favorite community builders took a step back and they started retiring from the industry. Not to say that they're not a community builder anymore. They started having their own businesses, their own focus, so they weren't there growing the community. And I felt very sad because there are a lot of these people that I looked up to a lot, and whether they left the country, went to focus on a completely different market, and the moment they left, there were no next generation trained. And the thing with the biggest problem in community building is that the successorship. Like you have the main community person, that person can be there forever, but the moment they leave, the community breaks up. A
So the
lot of
community is
communities
really personality based as opposed to a
it is
structure.
it is super personality based, and it's something that I try when I'm building a community to try to not do that. But the thing is that people follow individuals. That's it's just a nature. You follow someone that you can see as a leadership. And a lot of times when, for example, when I was building the community for whether it be legal tech or the seller community for Lazada and other ones, I really made it clear that I made people like me as a person. They were interested in Pixie. They liked Pixie. They knew Pixie was there for them. Therefore, let's follow what Pixie is saying. Even though what Pixie is saying is the organizational structure, what the community, like the main head is saying, but people would listen compared to if Pixie posts this versus the company admin account posts it. It is very helpful in the early days to do this, but it is very dangerous for long-term growth. So I proactively go, and when I started getting more gains and followers within the communities I'm building, I purposefully stepped back and started pushing my team and then rotating these team members for them to get into a habit. Anyone who works with this organization is there for the community, not just Pixie. And that is the exact problem that most of our communities are facing. So many cool things like Startup Mama is one of my favorite Facebook groups in Malaysia. The key admin is actually the main player. Like if you like it or not, he is the main reason why everything can drive. But what I really like about that particular group is that without him constantly there and engaging, like for example, Startup Mama now, they don't approve posts anymore. You can directly post now since COVID happened. And that was a really interesting move because then you can look at what are the type of content being pushed. Are they pushing a lot of spam stuff? By identifying that, you know that how mature has that community grown. So I see that as a very good example. But if you look at most communities in KL, they usually don't live more than 1 to 2 years, unfortunately. Because
Yeah,
the
interesting
founders
enough,
burn out.
I had an interview with Heislik a couple of weeks ago. So I'll post that
Yeah,
out. I'll post that out in the next couple of weeks. And it's
yeah,
interesting
looking
as he
for it.
was, yeah, because he was saying how, it did kind of grow organically to the
Hmm,
large numbers it has now. And
hmm.
he has always played, he tries to play a background role, right,
Yes,
to
you
Startup
can
Mama
see
and
that
let
one.
the community drive it. And I think that's been quite successful for him.
Yes, I really like how he did it as compared to the other community builders because he still has his business and his focus, right? And which is totally natural and important. But it did not die because he diverted attention. But most of the communities that you see out, some that went really, really well, the core community builders, the moment they shifted focus a bit or started having priorities, whether it be their family, their own business, all of these things that are extremely important, the target, the community kind of dropped because it was all about them. So, but Startup Mamak did a really good job in the groups. I'm really fan of them in this. But then that is a purely online community. So you don't have that kind of struggle you have as compared to those communities who are online and offline, that you need to maintain consistent events and all of that. Those ones die out even faster.
Yeah, and I think a lot of corporates are trying to do that, right? To be part of the community. And I think the easiest way is just pump money in marketing and branding activities.
Yes, no. Yes and no. Because let's use in the case in the corporate of that, all right, I want to engage my internal stakeholders. Let's say I have a huge user base of internal stakeholders and I want to get them to gain this trust towards me. Yes, I could spam them with seeing my name every day, but the thing why I feel that community is important to be brought into our general business operations is that people are used to ads. We don't get fooled by ads as easily. You see a billboard on the street, you're not suddenly loving that brand. You see a story about that brand, yes. The PR part works a lot too. But then people are also getting smart that everyone knows that PR stuff is fabricated. So what's next? So you need to think of community building if on a marketing and branding perspective is an elevative and more engaging element of PR. You do share with them what they're doing, but you need to make sure that community is all about a two-way communication. You are not telling consumers and your target audience, this is what you.
Yeah. Anyway, so let's get back to that. So you were saying it's not just about pushing the PR spin.
It's not a one-way communication. It has to be two-way. And the thing where community is so valuable is, especially businesses. I did a live stream on this yesterday, actually. For me, is that as a business, when you're growing, you need to continuously get feedback from people about what you're doing, how should you improve. So many businesses do customer surveys and satisfaction surveys, but if you can have this as a conversation as compared to fill out this form, you agree to, at a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about my user interface? This is helpful, but a community can give you that in-depth insights, and they're also your super users. And these kind of super fans is something that cannot be replaced with just paying someone off to do a survey. So many companies do those kind of focus groups, right? And you pay like $200, you get them over like 3 hours, and let's talk about what do we feel about this user interface. That is totally possible. Companies still can do this, but in my case, with the communities I build for companies, I don't ever do that. I get fans inside the group who are always engaging, who are, whether it be negative or positive, some people are complaining about the product or saying like, oh, I don't like this, but you can see that they're super objective. And this is extremely valuable insights that companies need to look at and take onto their business. When they go and let's say improve their product, share it to those group of people who were initially very negative and like, hey, I listened to you and this is what I did for you guys. This grows their trust towards the organization, which grows the fan base even more. You can't just, if you do a focus group and you pay that $250 and then you don't send those people an email saying, hey, we improved our product because we paid you to tell us something. Right?
I guess. Yeah. And I think it's interesting.
Hand in hand.
Yeah, and you mentioned about trust as well, right? So I think obviously there needs to be even at the beginning a certain level of trust to that product or service or company, and then you build on that, right?
Yes and no. So for some organizations that are lucky to already have a fan base with trust there, that's great. But in most cases, I think maybe just living in Malaysia, the majority of people will have that negativity towards the corporate, the big organization. It's this, unfortunately, our societal human nature of doubting everything. Even if you like it, you will generally say you don't like it that much with a lot of things, unless you're crazy, crazy fans. So most communities will not initially start from trust, but it needs to be the first thing an organization goes out of their way to try to build, to show that we are listening to you I want to take your input. I want to improve what we have here. How can I serve you? So we make them our key stakeholders.
So I guess what's interesting is how you mentioned a lot of your background was relevant to why you suddenly, well, not suddenly, but how you feel about community building, and how your travels have led you to this passion. Share that a little bit more.
So I would say on the travels part, that helped me was mainly because I'm so used to dealing with different people, and also made me understand how different people are. So you cannot do a one size fit all. You cannot just do a regular, like gather people together and expect them to fight for the same cause. You need to find the exact people who can fight for that cause. So understanding the differences between people helped me a lot. My general experience in dealing with different stakeholders at the same time, that played an important part. Also the part of just having to learn things on the go. So I would say a community builder is generally the jack of all trades, because they have to know everything. They have to learn everything. And because community will always have different questions to ask them about. And for me, another reason why this is such an important thing for me is because I really want to see how can you grow more trust within a society. Trust is very important, but the other reality is that people will do what they feel like doing, even though they know another way is the right way. So let's use MCO as an example. I'm sure that people who go out, who just aimlessly going out playing football and all of that, they know that it's not right. But why are they still taking that step to do that? Because also of the whole military school background and person interested in law, it's important to me that how can you condition people to do what is right? I don't actually believe that everyone knows to do the right thing. And maybe they know that what's the right thing, but they always have their personal interest at the end of the day. How can you match the personal interest and in a way the greater good, what is right, to make them feel that it is in their personal interest to do what is right? That is where it gets interesting, because all of these communities I deal with at the end of the day are looking at a societal point. How can you organize a country, a whole city, a town? How can you make sure the infrastructure, everything is aligned in the way that people are doing things as per what is designed? And this designing of a community needs to be flexible enough that people feel like they have breathing power, and also the organization takes on ideas. But then it also needs to be structured in a way that people know that, you know what, there are certain lines you do not cross. So every community needs to have a very strict and clear definition of what is okay and what is not okay. And a community builder has to go out their way to make sure, no, once you step this boundary, that is not acceptable. And continuously conditioning people that, you know what, this is how you do it, this is how you do it. And after like making sure these lines are very clear, people eventually end up working around this area instead of trying to go here. It sounds very manipulative, but that's the reality of what communities are about, actually.
Yeah, to your greater goal of the Pixie Cigar cult, you know, so sounds interesting. Actually,
I think behind the scenes.
I just want, yeah, so just on that, I wanted to go back to, I guess as a final topic then, is your journey into this filmmaking, right? So you did enjoy that you did animation out of force, I guess, not out of option per se. So what's the plan for that? Do you feel like you're gonna get back into it? You know, I see a lot of your videos, so I assume that passion is still there, right? You still use that as a media. So what are you gonna do about your recording and filming?
Also, the animation side, I just see this as one of the experiences that helped me be faster at learning other things. But like the reason why I'm doing the videos had nothing to do with my animation background. Even if I've never done it before, I'll still just figure out and use my phone how to edit stuff. The reason why I'm doing this is because when I know that there's a certain message I want to communicate, I need to understand the public, the community. What is the easiest way for them to digest this information? So it's nothing about myself. Even if I hated filming, I will still do filming because I know people absorb information like this better.
Mm.
At the end of the day, it's nothing to do with what I like as an individual. It's
Mm.
there's this message. What is the best way to communicate it?
So I guess there's two
So
parts,
this
right?
is
So
where
that's where you see it as another channel, right? Well, it's an efficient channel to convey your ideas. But what about Pixie's own interest in filming? Is that something you'll get back to?
Oh, maybe yes. I'm that person who watches movies and gets excited about how the camera took that angle.
Mm.
I'm like, oh my gosh, the camera went in like this instead of went in like this. That is so cool. And I'm like, did you see that shot? Like that was so. So I'm that person. I will still always love the art of filmmaking. I would say if one day I get this opportunity, like, hey Pixie, let's do a film together, which I'm already doing videos all the time. Like with the
Mm.
organizations I work with, I'm already doing script writing and all these stuff. So it's part of my day-to-day life already. So I don't see it as, oh, getting back to it. It's just I'm
Right.
not doing it at a film level scale. So every month I probably do the production of at least one video, like like with the whole film crew production. And
Mm.
on my own, I film videos at least once a week. I do webinars almost at least once a week. So video content is my day-to-day stuff.
That's your foundation now, pretty much.
Yeah, because it's how the community wants to be to get information.
Mm. So I guess last question is almost coming to the hour now. Don't want to take up too much of your time. So now you were saying your current project with Lazada. So what next for Pixie?
Oh, what's next? I think for me, still Lazada is part of a role now. And I think if we were to say my 2020 focus on community building will be to create way more content on the arts and skills of community building, and also already start mobilizing more community builders in this area, because still for me that education is really important. Even finding content on community building is not easy. You don't have much. You have these few key people that share content. You have CMX, these people, they share it, but if you look at it in Chinese or different languages, you don't have much access to learnings of community building. So I would say this year a lot of the focus is creating this kind of learning material and content, and also start looking back into community building for legal tech. But for me, even looking at legal tech, my main push will be the arts of it, because I don't believe into getting to an area that already has people in it. Legal tech, there's already some activity happening in KL, which I'm already quite happy with. I would want more, but if you would say on a priority level, instead of getting more people to be interested in legal tech versus getting more people to understand how to do community building, this serves a greater goal, because perfecting this, then it can be used in so many industries. It's not just legal tech. So I would say that would be more of a focus for this year.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot for taking the time. It was definitely
No
fascinating.
problem. I know I talk a lot.
Oh, it's perfect for programs like this. So I guess the last one is, I guess you'll have to ask your parents which country you're going to move on to next.
Oh, I don't know. I just got married, and
Oh,
me and my
congratulations.
husband were looking. Yeah, thank you. Just in January. So me and my husband were looking at other places potentially in the future. Because for me, I don't like to spend so long in one country. I like to move around. So we're still having that conversation. But I'm potentially looking at going back to study extra stuff soon too.
Okay. All the best with that.
Yeah.
And good luck with your community building.
Thank you.
And we'll chat again in a couple of months, hopefully, and see where you're at.
Definitely. Hopefully we get broken out of jail.
Yeah.
After all of this.
It'll happen.
That is the
It'll
goal.
happen.
Yes, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Pixie.
Bye.
Bye-bye.